over the news and new Judicial Watch documents, you name it, about how Google, Facebook, and Twitter were merged with the White House. They had government lavish facilities, 5-star, private jets, everything.
I don't understand how we got so toxic and just so divided and so bitter. And I get why sometimes people just don't want to pay attention to it.
Obama repealed the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act, which then permitted propaganda to be in broadcasting.
You have been subjected to the most massive, harmonized, globally coordinated propaganda campaign in the history of the Western world, full stop. With this campaign, the governments of many Western nation states have turned military-grade psychological operations strategies, tactics, technologies, and capabilities developed for modern military combat against their own citizens. Welcome to fifth-generation warfare. The battlefield is your mind.
Right here, this is you, okay? And all this surrounding you, these are the liberties we've been given in this amazing experiment we call the United States of America. You've got folks out there whose plan it is to just eat away at your liberties, at your First Amendment.
So with hard power ruled out as the dominant means to have an empire, the U.S. transitioned to a soft power empire, which would be dominated by agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, democracy promotion programs at the State Department, later USAID, and the whole swarm army we're about to meet. But even right out the gate, the Central Intelligence Agency immediately moved into the media space to control the messaging that people around the world experienced.
It is legal for the agency, the sister agency, the FBI, and the rest of them to put out intentionally misinformation, propaganda to American citizens now.
It's not like the crazy guy that firebombs a Tesla dealership. It's the people pushing the propaganda that caused that guy to do it.
Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh? Cool. Wow. Okay.
Terry. But you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
Right, we'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture. We'll
and you think it was Photoshop? Well,
here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because it's fake news.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in all of her mundane incomprehension of how America works, is announcing a ministry of truth that will decide what is and isn't disinformation.
I do think that several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy, because that is a part of what happened here. We're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation.
Let's see, we're getting there. Pretty soon, it's just going to be
a lot of the big legacy outlets were feasting at the taxpayer trough. We've got the New York Times, Reuters, Politico, you name it, consuming large amounts of tax dollars, a lot of it coming through USAID and other places.
How could these people be lying like this? I mean, you can't be that dumb. The only way it could happen is if somebody's actually paying you to say this stuff.
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
No congressionally appropriated funds should be used to broadcast news and information or other broadcast publications to the U.S. public or audience of a political nature. We don't need taxpayer dollars to ever go to that, and we should reinstate that portion of the Smith-Mundt Act, given what we've now discovered and uncovered about USA.
It's just going to be you.
This is about what we are willing to accept.
And then all of these liberties, see these liberties here?
But look, if people go to only one source, and the source they go to is sick, and has an agenda, and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence.
Those will be gone.
It's
Friday, May 2nd, in the year of our Lord, 2025. And you're listening to The American Journal with your host, Chase Geyser. Watch it live right now at band.video.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the American Journal. I am Chase Geyser, your host this morning. Harrison Smith will be hosting the afternoon show today, War Room, from 3 to 6 p.m. Central Time. Owen Schroyer will be back in studio next week, and you can see me again on Sunday night right after the Alex Jones show, which begins at 4. My show, Sunday Night Live, begins at 6 p.m. Well, folks. What a wild ride it's been these first 100 or so days under the Trump administration. We've seen escalations basically all over the world. We've seen a total global plot to sabotage the dollar and this Trump administration by any means necessary. And the entire political elite, political class of the world is in an uproar in response to a populist awakening which is taking place right before our eyes. We see the people in Germany, the people in Ireland, even the people in the United Kingdom are finally standing up against the establishment political class to reclaim their nations. Now, how convenient it would be for the globalists, for the elite, to have a false flag event, or really a false flag just collapse of civilization itself under the auspice of a populist awakening so that they can very conveniently blame this populism. I mean, we've seen it time and time again from Democrats as it pertains to Donald Trump, whether it was the first administration or this administration. We've seen that no matter what decision or policy he institutes or advocates or says, it's just attack, sabotage, frame, extort, coerce, blackmail. Over and over again. And it was really abundantly obvious when Trump came out and executed this tariff strategy upon the world in order to establish some sort of economic justice for the United States, and not just economic justice or benefit for our people in a pragmatic way, but a solution based on basic principles, self-evident principles of fairness and equality, of treatment, of business dealings. And I don't think a lot of people realize how brilliant his strategy really was. But if you were paying attention, or if you had the time, I know many of you are so busy, if you had the time to give it some thought, it was pretty clear what he was doing. You see, what we needed to do was institute tariff policies on China in order to divert away from being dependent on China for all of our goods and services and technology and things of that nature. Over the last 50 years, we've become so dependent on their manufacturing because it's basically our way of outsourcing slave labor. Little Chinese children with their little nimble fingers just poking around inside an iPhone. After they turn 13, they're just not good at it anymore. So we outsourced all of our manufacturing to China. We totally pulled the rug out from under organized labor, which is not much different from organized crime if you look at the history of Hoffa and the Mafia and its involvement with the Teamsters and other organized labor unions like that. But we pulled out the rug of our own manufacturing, outsourced it to China. China paid kickbacks to our politicians like Joe Biden and his family. And it's not just the Bidens, folks. They're all that bad. They really are all that bad. It's just the Bidens got caught because Hunter Biden was so bad that he would leave all of the evidence everywhere and just in some narcissistic crack cocaine fused fit. I guess it was meth, wasn't it? It wasn't crack. I don't know. I mix them up. In some fit, he decided he wanted to film absolutely everything that he did, even conversations on the most low-resolution camera ever. It's like a UFO sighting, but it's just, oh, that is Hunter Biden sitting there, cracked out. Talking about how his business partner was the chief spy of China, talking about the business deals with China, the millions of dollars in bank accounts that are opened in the Chinese National Bank. The sabotage of all of our national security interests in the Pacific is because China bought us out so that our policies would still ensure that we were reliant on China. A mutual dependence Just like during the Cold War when we had mutually assured destruction in the instance of a nuclear weapon being used, we had mutually assured destruction in this Cold War that we're in right now with China if there's any major upheaval in the nature of the relationship. But the problem is there's one difference. See, with mutually assured destruction during the Cold War, it was never guaranteed that a nuclear weapon would be used. And that's how we were able to find our way out of that forest, eke our way out of that maze without millions upon millions, even billions upon billions of people dying in a nuclear apocalypse. But the difference between our mutually assured destruction now with this economic Cold War that we've been in with China is that it is inevitable that one of these parties is going to collapse. Frankly, it's guaranteed that China is going to collapse. What's not guaranteed yet is whether or not the United States economy is going to collapse, the dollar. Now, it will if we don't do something, if we don't change the very nature of our money, if we don't change the way that we back our dollar so it's backed by something real and precious instead of real and vicious like war. But you'll see that this is inevitable. And Trump, foreseeing that this was inevitable and needing to do something about it without catalyzing some cataclysmic event, elected the tariff strategy. Now, when you're going to impose tariffs on China, they're very sensitive people, Chinese. Very long-standing culture of honor and authoritarianism and submission. I mean, they're famous for building up walls and dynasties, experimenting with mercury and not being seen. Some of their dynastic leaders would do because it was thought that if they were never seen and they consumed mercury, then they would never die. Of course, someone eventually found them dead. But if you want to impose a tariff on China, you can't just attack China and not impose tariffs on anyone else. I mean, that is disproportionate, reactionary behavior right there. It's totally unfair. It's insulting. It's disrespectful. It's targeted. It's racist. So what you do is you do blanket reciprocal tariffs on everyone that we do business with in the world. And then when China retaliates, you escalate those tariffs. And when the rest of the world says we're not going to retaliate, we're going to lower our tariffs, then you eliminate those tariffs, and all of a sudden you wind up in a place where only China is experiencing the brunt of our tariff policy. No one else is, but it doesn't look like we specifically targeted China because we have a blanket reciprocal policy. But why would we do this? Why would we just impose all these tariffs on Chinese imports into the United States of America and cause the costs of these goods to go up so that the American people have to suffer the increased cost of technology and goods? Amazon prices are through the roof. Here at InfoWars, we're frantically trying to order any gear or products that we need before these tariffs manifest. Why would you do that? Because if we wait and we don't do it until there's total economic collapse in China, which is inevitable, and I'll explain why, then the results will be catastrophic, instantaneous, and brutal for the economy. But if we do this tariff method, it forces business to diversify manufacturing into other strategic partners like India or Mexico or domestically here in the United States of America. Because what people don't really talk about, only a few people talk about it, maybe some of the Stratford guys, George Friedman, Peter Zeihan, even though I think he's retarded, has mentioned it, is that China's population is totally collapsing. They have an average of 1 child per woman when we know that the average needs to be between 2.1 and 2.3 for civilization to be self-sustaining. Here in the United States, we're only having 1.7 children per woman. So our Democratic leaders have decided that they're just going to import in as many millions of people as possible. I think for the first time since like 1857 or something like that, we had more people who immigrated into the United States than were born in the United States over the course of the last several years. under the Biden administration. That's the Democratic solution. All right, well, if we're not having enough people to sustain our political class, the foundation, the people being the foundation of our political elite, paying taxes into it, feeding into it, electing us into it, then we'll just import them and sell out our culture, our civilization, our ideals, our values, our safety. We'll just sell it all out. We'll import these people, and then we'll have a labor base of retarded Muslims and Mexicans in the country who want to rape everybody and stab everybody, whatever. And I know that the vast majority of Mexicans are so cool. I'm not trying to be racist here. I am Islamophobic, but I'm not racist. There's a difference. You choose your religion. You're born into your race, and I believe that we should determine people based on their individual characteristics rather than their immutable characteristics or whatever group identity they're a part of. So I don't judge people because they're born into Islam. I judge them because they choose to stay in Islam. I mean, it's like deciding to stay in a cult after you realize that it's the cultiest cult you've ever seen in cult world. In fact, if you guys can find that, I think Valentina Gomez clip where she pretended to be a Muslim the other day in Texas and spoke at the protest against Greg Abbott's policies against these Muslim compounds that are coming up in Texas, you'll find it's so funny. But my point is, China's population is totally collapsing, and they're not going to have a labor force in 10, 15, or 20 years to meet the demand of the U.S. market, let alone the global market. They simply won't have enough people to operate the infrastructure that they have set up, to operate the factories, the manufacturing facilities, the businesses that they have set up to be the supplier of the world of virtually everything. And so when their economy collapses, when their demographic collapses, that's going to be an instantaneous, drastic increase in cost for all economies that are dependent on Chinese manufacturing. And if we'd done nothing to prepare for that or to diversify, then we would see unsustainable, unfixable pain for an extended period of time. So what you do is before that happens, before China retires, literally retires, and then their labor costs go way up because there's fewer of them, so you have to bid to get somebody to work at your facility, and then that causes all the costs to go up. You find a way to diversify. You impose tariffs on China, then all of a sudden it's less expensive to manufacture in India, right next door. And if people say, well, India gets all of its raw materials from China. Yeah, but China's whole demographic is collapsing, and their whole economy is going to collapse as a result of that. So they're not going to have any choice but to export the raw materials to India. They're not going to hold back their raw materials so that they just starve to death in a pile of gold. It's like going down with the pirate ship in the ocean, loaded up with gold, instead of getting off the boat because you don't want to leave your gold behind. They're not going to do it. They are going to be exporting their raw materials to India, other nations, whatever. And when you realize that the population crisis is the reason for so much of what we have seen in the world, then all of a sudden you start to understand why the Elon Musks have been coming out basically out of nowhere talking about how the greatest threat to our species isn't climate change or some cataclysmic existential event. It's depopulation. And I looked, I did some research. I looked throughout history, and there are very few cases where a population of a civilization has drastically declined and recovered. Some populations were able to do so during things like the Black Plague. But when you have a systemic institutional cause of a population crisis, of a low birth rate, when it's not some meteorite or volcano or massive storm or massive drought or famine, when it's actually because something is inherently and fundamentally unhealthy with where a culture has arrived, that is the beginning of the end. I mean, look at Rome. We saw what they did with the cheapening of their currency, with the hiring on of mercenaries instead of recruiting legitimate soldiers into their military, with the abundance of expansion, with the failure to protect their borders, with the conversion from a republic to a autocracy, and then into some weird form of an oligarchy where you have co-Caesars and weird committees and constant assassinations, even the Praetorian Guard responsible for some of them. You saw in that time of Rome, the late stage of Rome, they had a major decline in population. People were having fewer children. And the same thing has happened here in the United States of America, where we went off of the gold standard in the 70s. It catalyzed the feminist movement because both parents had to work. We outsourced the raising of our children to the state. And then our children became dependent on us financially for longer periods of time into adulthood, to the point where they get married later and have children later, and therefore fewer children. And because of the psychological impact that has on a young man who is not meant to be in a cage or a basement, living with his parents until his late 20s because of the college debt and the bad economy and the inflation, and it just never seems possible to save up for a down payment on a house. Then you have these men who are unattached for so long, and they either go one of two ways. They go the kind of Andrew Tate way, abundance of women, polyamory, sleep with whoever, kind of alpha way, or they go the beta way, where they become involuntarily celibate, where they lack the confidence or the experience to connect with women. And women, of course, because of our culture, are entitled to, only the richest, the best looking, the most charming men you can possibly imagine. And so they just wait it out, thinking that they're going to find Mr. Right. Meanwhile, they're just sleeping with all these different people, but they're all on birth control, so they're not having any kids. I mean, it's rotted our entire family structure, this inflation, this economic policy that we've had. It's catalyzed Marxism by forcing us to outsource the raising of our children to the state, which is inevitably going to turn to expansionary thought in practice and teachings. And it's resulted in the death of our people. It's actually killed us. The 80s, they did a study under the Reagan administration. Every 1% that unemployment goes up, 38,000 people die. More than that now. I've never seen the study, but I imagine it could be deduced how many people die per percentage that inflation goes up. And I know Trump's done a lot to help with this and mitigate some of the inflation problems, but you realize that over the last 4 years, 40% of all dollars ever printed were printed, and banks basically don't have to keep any money in reserve to account for their deposits. I mean, it's called fractional reserve banking in part because only a fraction of the money in circulation is actually in the bank, right? If you have $100,000 in the bank, I think for a long time there had to be a minimum of $25,000 of it actually in the bank, and then it went down to $15,000 and then $10,000. And I think under COVID, it might have gone down all the way to zero because they were trying to stimulate the economy while it was shut down. Of course, while it was shut down, only the major corporations and technocrats, the Bezoses and the Gateses and others, were doing any business at all. And so when you put all that money in circulation and there's only a few people available to even make that money that's in circulation, well, then you wind up with the bankers and the political class and the military contractors and the researchers and the federally funded institutions and the major monopolies, the Googles, the Amazons, the Metas, with all the money. It was a total redistribution of wealth, but in the other direction. It wasn't stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, folks. It was stealing from the poor and giving to the rich. I mean, that is what Robin Hood is. People hear the story of Robin Hood and they think it's about stealing from a successful, wealthy person in order to give the needy. And they try to weaponize the government to manifest that moral principle. When if you look at the story of Robin Hood, it was the government stealing from the poor to bolster the political elite, the king and his friends and his associates. It's exactly what the Democrats are advocating now. She's literally saying tax the rich. She's saying eat the rich. We've seen it time and time again. While they tax the hell out of us, redistribute it to their own political class and contractors who do virtually nothing but ensure that they spend the same amount of money every year so they get refunded the same amount. all while having the audacity then to complain when we raise taxes on China. Tell me, AOC and Amy Face Jar, who do you really represent? Because you're all about raising taxes on the American people and everybody should pay their fair share. Well, China's supposedly one of the richest economies in the entire world. Why is it that you think it's a real shame when we raise taxes on them? I mean, we know the money goes to President Xi Jinping. Well, maybe it's because the likes of you and the Gavin Newsoms and the Nancy Pelosi's love rolling out the red carpet, no pun intended, when the likes of Xi Jinping come to the United States of America. We saw what you did in San Francisco, where you cleaned the streets for a Chinaman in a matter of days, streets that you would not clean for the people of America who live there for years and decades. I mean, San Francisco is famous for being a fentanyl-laden, heroin-ridden junkyard. You got your big Silicon Valley tech companies on their high-rises looking down on the sewage below. They can afford to pay their $1 million for their studio apartment downtown. They give you a towel when you walk into the ground floor of your apartment, bougie apartment in San Francisco, so you can clean off the bottom of your shoes from the homeless that you stepped on the way in. But they cleaned it all up for Xi Jinping because the political class has either been compromised by the intelligence community through operations like what Epstein did. So there's a blackmail angle, or they've been paid off by China like the Bidens were. And you know what's so interesting to me? What's so brutally, amazingly, fantastically interesting to me? We know Joe Biden's a scumbag. We know Hunter Biden loves hookers and underage girls and drugs. Why is it that of all the people that we know were on the flight logs, of all the people that we know were on Epstein's list, why is it that Hunter Biden never once, despite all of his indiscretion, appeared on that island, on that list? He seems like a perfect candidate to blackmail the president because the Bidens knew what was going on, because China told them, because China owned them and didn't want anybody else to have a share of their take. Stay with us for more news on the other side, folks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chase Geiser, your host. Harrison Smith will be hosting the War Room this afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. Central, so make sure you tune in for that. Of course, don't miss the Alex Jones Show at 11 a.m. Central Time. 4 hours of unrelenting truth in the face of a total assault by globalists on freedom of speech every single day. Mind-blowing, the amount of attacks that we face. I wish that I could tell you everything that we see, but I can't because it's happening. And if I tell you while it's happening, it changes the way that it plays out. But maybe one day, 50 years from now, I'll see some kid walking by in a black T-shirt with Alex Jones' face on it, holding up a revolver, pointing at the camera, my favorite shirt that we've ever designed, on the AlexJonesStore.com. And I'll say, Alex Jones, in my old groany voice. And the kid will say, oh, you know who Alex Jones is? I'll say, let me tell you a story. Because it is mind-blowing what's happened here. The things like you would see in some Hollywood film about sabotage and betrayal and espionage and corruption. I mean, it's everything from a Godfather movie to a Wolf of Wall Street type movie to some brutal epic like Lord of the Rings when King Theoden runs straight into the lines to save Gondor. And honestly, I got to tell you, if Alex Jones is like any character from Lord of the Rings, because I've been thinking about this. I used to think that there were 26 different personality types because the Myers-Briggs personality is 4 different versions of 4 different letters and different combinations. But I would say as a joke that Alex Jones is the 27th personality type because he's the only person like him. But he's a lot like King Theoden, Lord of the Rings. He's not Trump, which would be like an Aragorn or whoever the King of Gondor is. He's not some political class ball crapper like the Steward of Gondor. He's like the king of a smaller kingdom that's essential to save the entire species, the entire planet from relentless and senseless and reckless, to use Theoden's words, evil and hate. What can men do against such reckless hate? Ride out and meet them. And one day you'll know the full story about what happened here. I always knew that the attacks on Alex Jones were political and that they wanted to silence him. I didn't realize how insidious it really was till I got here. Till I saw the conversations with lawyers and the developments and the filings and the evidence, until it was uncovered that the DOJ funded those very institutions who attacked us upwards of $4 million, an estimated $4 million. Public record, you can just look it up. Just look up some organizations that are associated with who sued us and then look up DOJ contracts or grants and you'll see millions of dollars. And look up how much money members of the board of directors of these institutions have made. And you'll be astounded to see that our federal government has been paying people to take us down, admitting that they don't even want the money because we've offered them tens of millions of dollars to just let us operate. Said, no, we don't want the money. We want you shut down. So the whole point of the lawfare, the whole point of all this litigation against us has been to silence us, and it's been funded by the federal government. Therefore, the federal government has conspired against our rights as freedom of speech as individuals and as freedom of the press as a press outlet. And if InfoWars isn't a press outlet, then who is? Because I'm telling you, folks, nobody's watching CNN. Hardly anybody's watching Fox now that Tucker's gone. Nobody's watching MSNBC. Nobody's listening to Joy Reid. Nobody's listening to Rachel Maddow. Nobody's listening to Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper, Brian Stelter, Wolf Blitzer, all these names that we used to know, that we used to be reeling from when they would say something asinine because we knew so many people were being influenced by it. They don't have an audience. InfoWars has millions of people listening a day. And we have no way of knowing the exact numbers. We can calculate how many people will view us on the website because of the bandwidth costs. We can see how many people have viewed us on X or Rumble. But we have no way of knowing even what radio stations are picking us up because we give out our feed free to air. It's always been free to air. So we have hundreds, at least 350, I believe, that we've been able to identify. But we do have hundreds of radio stations broadcasting us all over the world. So if InfoWars isn't protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution of America, or the Constitution of the United States of America, rather, if InfoWars isn't protected as a press outlet under our protections as freedom of the press, then who is? New York Times? When was the last time you saw someone reading a New York Times? It's funny, I was in California for Easter because my wife's family lives in Southern California. And it was either for a birthday or Easter last year or something. My father-in-law got a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. And I asked him, I said, how do you like it? And he said, it sucks. It's terrible. I think he just hit the word terrible. It's terrible. It's still got Peggy Noonan writing some interesting op-ed, I'm sure. She used to be a speechwriter for Reagan, but I think it just became neoconservative trash. Project Mockingbird style sabotage, where they send in people from the CIA, from the FBI, to either leverage the existing staff or to become the existing staff. And then they just put out whatever the directed narrative is. It's controlled opposition. Used to be the case that New York Times was a left-leaning publication and the Wall Street Journal was the right-leaning publication. And it was some faux dichotomy or balance between good and evil, where whatever side you were on, that was the team that you were going to root for. It was like a rigged game of the Super Bowl or something like that. People would get all hung up and excited about what was coming out in their paper that day or who scored a touchdown for their team that day when the whole game has just been set up the entire time and people figured it out and nobody's reading it. It's because they lied to us incessantly about virtually everything for virtually all time. At least when they were lying to us in the 50s and the 60s, we had some sort of cultural consensus. So when they lied to us about the Cold War and the threat of Russia, at least we all kind of agreed as a nation that communists were bad and dangerous and the Soviets were coming to get us. And so we could get behind that lie. Then when they lied to us about 9/11 and what they knew about it and who was really responsible and how those buildings came down, at least we had some sort of cultural consensus against radical Islam. So we could get behind that lie. But then we realized that these lies were not weaponized on our behalf. They were weaponized against us. Cold War weaponized against us to justify taxes going to the expansion of the military-industrial complex. The lies of 9/11 weaponized against us to justify going into war in the Middle East to protect the dollar as the global reserve currency, all while expanding the government's power to surveil our own citizens because we're trying to compete with China's ability to totally control its own population. Well, that was a lie that harmed us. Or the banks that were protected and bailed out while they lied to us about the safety of investing in mortgages in the United States of America, caused a total collapse of the entire economy. This is basically fraudulent. I think only one person ever went to jail over anything related to it in 2008. And then COVID-19. First, they lied to us about the fact that they designed it. Then they lied to us about the fact that they designed it in an enemy lab. Then they lied to us about the fact that that enemy intentionally spread it all over the world once they knew it was released. We know this because they canceled all domestic flights in and out of Wuhan, but allowed international flights in and out of Wuhan to persist. Then they lied to us about the efficacy of the vaccine. And then they lied to us about the safety of the vaccine. And then they insisted that we give it to our children because it was an emergency, even though children never died of COVID-19. So now they're killing our children. They've sabotaged our currency. So we have to outsource the raising of our children to the state. And then those children among us who do survive either wind up sterilized because they've been transified, or just non-player characters in the zombie woke mob, indoctrinated. And then they indebt them, so they have to sell out to these institutions they've been indoctrinated by in order to be able to pay off the debt that they owe these institutions. They charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars to get indoctrinated. Then when you graduate, you have to work for an established company in order to pay off that debt. And that established company has DEI qualifications, ESG score qualifications. And if you don't comply with any of their HR policies of leftism, then you're never going to pay off your college debt. Then you are broke and have lost everything forever. So they leverage you financially, they leverage you psychologically, they leverage you spiritually, and they leverage you physically. I mean, our fertility rates are plummeted. Generations among us are on all sorts of SSRIs. There's your mind gone. There's your body gone right there. Economically, you're wrecked because of inflation and then debt from these indoctrination institutions. And then you're spiritually wrecked too because this indoctrination has put you in a position where you have to sell out any of your own beliefs or principles for the sake of some DEI board or ESG board. All international ideas, by the way. Yes, they're advocated domestically quite a bit, but they all come from the BlackRocks or the International Bank of Settlements or the IMF. All these major globalist, centralist institutions like the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, NATO, you name it. They're all advocating for this diversity, equity, and inclusion and environmental sustainability and governance scores, which are totally arbitrary and determined by boards often composed of international interests, rippling down, trickling down into our daily lives to the point where you have to hand your kid every day to some wokist leftist teacher who is just itching for any opportunity to convince your child that they're the opposite gender of which they're born? They're killing us. And they're doing it so slowly that we don't even notice. And, I took a class in college on leadership. I can't remember what it was called. The class was terrible. And the books were also terrible, but they were telling. And there was some book written on leadership. I can't remember the name of it. I remember it was a black book by some Harvard professor. And in the book, there were these different chapters about informal and formal authority and pacing the change. So informal authority would be like a Martin Luther King Jr. or an Alex Jones. They haven't been elected. They have no formal position of power in any institution, whether government or private. They have just been given informal authority because they have corralled enough influence and faith in the people. So Alex Jones is influential through something called informal authority. No official role in the administration, no official political power, but if he says something, there's movement because of his informal authority. Formal authority, of course, being like a senator or a congressman or a CEO or a president, whatever. I mean, no matter if anybody likes them or not, they still legally just have the formal authority to execute their will. But there was this concept called pacing the change. And now that I've been enlightened to some of this globalist philosophy and approach the last few years, I realized that the books that I was reading in college were exactly the school of thought of these globalists, exactly the playbook of these globalists. This idea that if you want to go from point A to point B, you can't bring everybody to point B instantly because they'll reject it. They'll have like an immune response to it, like somebody who gets an organ transplant without any immunosuppressive drugs. Their body, their immune system just attacks it. This isn't ours. This isn't ours. Get out, get out, get out. We see it in businesses with culture shock. We see it when brands redesign too quickly. When Coca-Cola all of a sudden got rid of Coca-Cola and called it New Coke, and there was this massive backlash. But when you pace the change, when you gradually bring people from A to B, like the frog in boiling water, then they don't even notice it. I guarantee you, as a matter of fact, if they had slowly changed the formula of Coca-Cola from Coca-Cola to New Coke over the course of 10 years, just gradually modifying it week after week, day after day, month after month, so incrementally, nobody would ever have noticed. And there'd be some old lady or some old guy, I swear to God, it used to taste different. You're crazy. You're crazy. That's Mandela effect. You're crazy. You're nuts. Whatever, old man. Nobody would notice. And so what they've decided, these globalists who have outsourced their wills and their consciousness to the institutions they participate in, they have delegated, relegated their minds to a macro consciousness. What they have decided is that over decades, they will pace the change to total globalist conglomeration, political class, political elite, international control. And intuitively, it doesn't make sense because we as individuals understand that there's not a whole lot of an incentive for someone to sell out or work for something that won't manifest until after they die. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about the notion of the pyramids. So many people worked on those pyramids, would never live to even see them completed. So many people have worked on cathedrals, may not have even lived to see them completed. But the institution behind them propels generations of people to make something that won't manifest until some distant, unforeseen time in the future. So what I'm trying to say here is that NATO, the UN, the World Economic Forum, the globalist political class, political elite, they have a consciousness as organizations. We have manifest this artificial intelligence where these little peons that operate within the macro intelligence just donate a portion of consciousness, like a neuron is only part of our mind. These are little neurons, little peons in a macro beast that has been manifest by corruption and incentive and bad will. In these macro institutions, this macro globalist consciousness in which no person understands all of it, but all people participate in some of it, this consciousness has decided to subjugate all of humanity and conglomerate all political power. And it's decided to do it over the course of generations. Because it can't be done instantly. If it's done instantly, it gets rejected, just like an immunoresponse to an organ transplant. So first, we're going to start here with taking the dollar off gold. Then we're going to have some hyperinflation. And over time, that's going to apply pressure for women to work because men won't be able to afford to sustain their families. And when women have to work, that is going to manifest the feminist movement as a psychological cope to justify it. And that justification will then become moral imperative. And when it becomes moral imperative, then young women will reject the notion of starting a family young for the sake of having a career. They'll, frankly, even be embarrassed if they're stay-at-home mothers when they're young because they'll feel that their peers are smarter or more successful than they are. And that they've sold out and submitted to the patriarchy by having children and staying at home with them. And then when that happens, you'll have generations of men dependent on establishment institutions to the point where they live with their family. They have to go to these colleges that are funded by the federal government, and basically the only jobs left are federal jobs. And you see it play out in states. I think 96% of all new hires in the state of California last year or in 2023 were hired by the state. 96% of all new hires were state employees, either federal or state government. And then once the government is all of the jobs, then you see the real collapse. And when you see the real collapse, then you see the panic response to it, the pre-planned post-apocalypse infrastructure. That's why they're setting up things like CBDCs, despite the fact that President Trump has signed an executive order saying that the United States of America will never participate in a central bank digital currency. Why are you still setting it up? They have it all. All the technology has been tested through Bitcoin. All the blockchain technology has been tested. We have this infrastructure in place. China's also tested it. We have a central bank digital currency that would be able to control every transaction and what types of things you could spend money on. Even if you had $100,000, you'd only be allocated 100 of it to gasoline, 100 of it to carbon, 100 of it to food, or of the food you get, 90% of your purchases have to be Soylent Green instead of real meat. And then they'll control everybody's money through that, everybody's mind through this indoctrination. And they'll justify massive depopulation. In fact, the wars and conflicts that'll be caused as a result of this collapse will catalyze the depopulation. And they'll blame the wars on populism. Oh, if only these nations didn't believe in their sovereignty, if only these people weren't so selfish and were willing to sacrifice themselves to the masses, if they were willing to adopt a more altruistic philosophy, whereby they would live for the greater good, then none of this would have ever happened. It was selfish, capitalistic, greedy people who manifest this. And that's why we need to have one world government, one world currency that will never go wrong ever again, that can never inflate ever again. Welcome to the world of the central bank digital currency. The one world nation own, where you will own nothing and be happy. They put it in their ads. But if you don't own it, who does? If you're renting everything that you use or need in your life instead of owning it, because ownership is such a burden, who are you renting it from? They will own it. The governments will own it. The organizations and businesses that on the face say they're independent, but are in actuality really just globalist cutouts, will own it. It'll be owned by the Googles and the BlackRocks and the OpenAIs and the Amazons and the Metas. Meta now trying to engineer artificial intelligence friends who allegedly will talk to children about inappropriate things. Not sure if it's a bug or a feature, probably both. And on the face, they act so innocuous. They act so innocent. The Mark Zuckerbergs, I'd love to go bow hunting. Can't answer a single question about bow hunting on Joe Rogan. Obviously, just microdosing psilocybin every day. Wears a necklace, grows his hair out, wears an oversized T-shirt, starts doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and tries to fit in with the podcast guys just for PR's sake. The guy's a sociopath. Absolute maniacal sociopath. Sold all of our data to anybody who was buying. Totally alienated his business partners in the beginning. Stole a lot of his ideas. I mean, the dude is a psychopath. Brainwashed generations of people. Hijacked data. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So right now we're on the precipice. The cusp. We're at a fork in the road. Are we going to salvage humanity or are we going to allow it to be taken over? They attack us physically with our bodies, which is why you have to go to the AlexJonesStore.com. Fight for your body with the ultimate sea moss. The Irish sea moss is absolutely amazing. The Shilajit, absolutely outstanding. They attack us on our minds. Gosh, you've seen that ever since Mockingbird. And it goes on and on. You can fight for that with methylene blue. It'll light you up like a Christmas tree. It will make you feel like you're plugged into the wall. It's absolutely amazing. They attack us with our soul, our spirit, which is why you have to share this broadcast everywhere that you can by going to @RealAlexJones on X, @Infowars on X, retweeting the feed, pulling the clips from band.video, or downloading them directly from Twitter, which you can do now when we upload them, and sharing them everywhere. But please go to the AlexJonesStore.com right now because we need your support more now than ever. The future is uncertain and the end is always near, but the AlexJonesStore.com will ensure that Alex Jones will always be on the air. So fight for your mind, fight for your body, fight for your soul, and fight for the truth and freedom of speech itself. Fight for humanity itself by going to the AlexJonesStore.com. That is the #1 thing you can do to stick it to the globalists. Stay with us for more news on the other side.
And you know what? They ought to find out who was using that auto pen. Because whoever that person was, he or she, was like the president of the United States.
Trump saying we need to arrest, and you know he's directing that investigation, and it's cut and dry. The people, the committee, the oligarchs, the plutocrats, the bureaucrats that are allied with much of the corrupt judiciary, trying to continue on their bureaucratic, judicial, police state, and unelected coup.
We are here today because the rule of law and democracy in the United States is under attack. Not by a foreign adversary or some distant threat. The rule of law is being attacked and subverted from within, from an administration intoxicated by its own power and enabled by a supine Congress.
Trump is saying these oligarchs, these plutocrats, need to be arrested, and they really do. A dictatorship is one person through an authoritarian, totalitarian system. But a plutocracy is a board or committee, council that is dictatorial and tyrannical and forms a dictatorship, but not of an individual, of a group. And that's what the deep state is.
Just as the president has crashed the stock market with his illegal tariffs, he has crashed the justice system with his dreadful appointments and vindictive policies. He's filled the leadership of the Department of Justice with his personal lawyers, unapologetically extremist sycophants like Kash Patel and Ed Martin, who elevate their devotion to Trump over any semblance of fidelity to the Constitution, the rule of law, and the rules of professional responsibility.
He used this like it was a fake Oval Office, weirdly, oddly. He was missing in action. He called lids at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. For those who don't know, a lid is when we tell the press to go home for the night. And he was doing that midday. That is not acceptable around here. I will tell you, we're working very early through the very late hours of the night. And the president's willing to talk to anyone.
And they say that 99+% of all of the bills and orders and all of it were signed by AutoPen. They found 2 signatures that are his, that are different. All the others are AutoPen. And then they checked. Most of the time he was out of D.C., wasn't even around, and they admit didn't even read it. People are kind of punch drunk over the tyranny. It's just kind of, okay, we know it's there, but yeah, we know they censor patriots that come after talk show hosts, that come after Trump, and yeah, they tried to kill him, and yeah, they're child molesters, and yeah, the borders, you know, but it's kind of like, well, all right, that's just what they do. So even though we're waking up, even though we're having some victories, there's still too much of a normalization about, well, that's just what, you know, the bureaucrats do. They just plot to overthrow the president. You know, Phil Mudd of the CIA goes on CNN and says the CIA is going to kill this guy.
Let me give you one bottom line. As a former government official, government's going to kill this guy.
They didn't do anything because I guess it's tyrannical to go SWAT team Phil Mudd, who used to run international assassination operations. I mean, it's not like he's a homeless person that's schizophrenic or something. He's a guy that does this. And he's on TV saying, we're going to kill Trump. And you got Brennan, the former head of the CIA, we know, running the inside, you know, ringleading operation of this. Crossfire, Hurricane, all of it, you know, came out later. And at the time, I'm saying, this is the guy. And it's like, well, that's a little alarmist from Alex Jones. No, it's not. No, it's not.
I think, first of all, that John Brennan is one of the darkest figures of our generation.
Wow.
In my own case, I was arrested in January of 2012 and charged with 5 felonies, including 3 counts of espionage for blowing the whistle on the CIA's torture program. In the course of receiving discovery from the Justice Department, and all of my discovery was classified. It was 15,000 pages of classified discovery.
Wow.
We found 3 memos. One was a memo from John Brennan to Eric Holder saying, charge him with espionage. And then Holder wrote back and said, my people don't think he committed espionage.
Wow.
And then Brennan wrote back and said, charge him anyway and make him defend himself.
Well, can you handle it if they kill Trump? Can you handle it when they trigger a big false flag? Because you got to get those people out yesterday because they're actively plotting all sorts of illegal crap, they admit. But that's a story nobody cares about.
Welcome back to the American Journal, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chase Geiser, your host this morning. Harrison Smith will be hosting the War Room this afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. Of course, the legendary, the iconic Alex Jones from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central, 4 hours of relentless truth. Can you handle it? In the first segment, I was talking a little bit about Epstein and in China and the tariffs and what's really going on. And at the very end of the segment, I mentioned, isn't it very interesting how of all the people one would expect would be on an Epstein list, one would expect would be on a flight log going to Epstein's Island, Hunter Biden never appeared. And we know he was particularly rowdy while Epstein was active. Early 2000s, getting kicked out of the military because of cocaine abuse. Joe Biden was vice president from 2008 to 2016. I mean, this is prime time Jeffrey Epstein, blackmail, sex ring, shenanigans. And of all the people, the Bill Gateses, the Bill Clintons that we've seen on those flight logs that we know were on that island, one would think that a senator's son, Hunter Biden, or the vice president's son, Hunter Biden, would absolutely have been a target for this blackmail operation and would absolutely have loved to go to an island to party and sleep with underage women. I mean, it sounds right up his alley. Sounds like he would have been like, okay, sounds great. Can I bring my laptop? Is there Wi-Fi on the plane? But for some reason, Bidens don't really seem connected to the Epsteins. Maybe they are. Maybe we'll find something out that I don't yet understand. But they don't seem connected to the Epsteins in the way of being victims of Epstein. And by victim, I mean blackmail victim. Of course, there were real victims of the actual sex trafficking that was taking place. And I pose the hypothesis that the Epstein angle on this blackmail is really a CIA operation, probably through Mossad, to have leverage over our political class And that the other angle where our political class is leveraged is China buying our politicians out. Klobuchars, the Pelosi's, the Bidens, where they just pay them off, they give them business deals, they give them insider tips and stocks to invest in, whatever. They pay them off for favorable policy in the Indo-Pacific region, favorable trade policy, favorable advocacy for better tariff rates for China, not for the United States. That's why we saw this relentless just mob of leftists come out and oppose to these tariffs. And what do you know, but this comes across my desk from the Gateway Pundit. Report, FBI agent Elvis Chan, key figure in 2020 election censorship scheme, placed on terminal leave. Now, I'm not saying that Elvis Chan is a Chinese spy, but if I was going to cast anyone to be a Chinese spy in a movie, this is central casting right here. I mean, first of all, when you breed or have or manifest a spy in another country, you want them to seem as much like that other country as possible. But the Chinese are notoriously bad at this. So they were sitting in a circle, the CCP, like, all right, what should we name this spy? What's a popular American name? Elvis! Oh, yeah, we love Elvis. Let's name him Elvis. They love Elvis in America. So they name him Elvis because, you know, that's just a really popular American name. Just because everybody in the world knows Elvis Presley doesn't mean that everybody in America is Elvis. They sent him into the FBI. Chan, who served as the FBI's key liaison between the Foreign Influence Task Force and big tech companies like Twitter, Facebook, and Google, was instrumental in a government-led censorship campaign to silence conservative voices and suppress damaging information about Hunter Biden in the lead up to the election. So we literally got a Chinese spy working for the FBI, protecting Hunter Biden from the laptop story because China owns the Bidens. And they knew that the ramifications for China were going to be terrible, that his business dealings were going to be terrible, that the oil fields that he was selling to the CCP were terrible, that the interests that he was selling out to the CCP at the expense of our actual national security, not some neoconservative notion of national security or some leftist political class notion of national security where it's just a justification for some senseless violation of our rights. I mean, actual national security interests sold out. Things like supply chains for oil and key naval passageways and island hopping and territories and these artificial islands that China's been building in the sea, which are really going to serve as military ports in the event of a World War III escalation. And so what I would suggest is that rather than thinking of Mossad as blackmailing the United States in order to get us involved in wars that protect Israel, we should consider the fact that the CIA is using Mossad to blackmail our own political class to justify getting us into wars in the Middle East so we can protect the dollar as the global reserve currency. And China is trying to buy off the other half of the politicians that the CIA has not been able to blackmail or leverage through operations like Epstein. Because you know Hunter Biden was like, Dad, come on, let me go to the island. No, we work for China, not the CIA. We work for the CCP, not the CIA. If you go to that island, son, I'll disown you. If you go to that island, son, I won't pardon you. So Hunter Biden never makes it to the Epstein Island because he works for the CCP, and there you see the dichotomy. Why wouldn't the CCP want anybody to be blackmailed by Epstein? Because the Epstein operation was the CIA using Mossad as the street crew. Just like the CIA has a history of using the mafia in the United States of America to do things like perform hits or run drugs or run weapons. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. So they use foreign intelligence and foreign mafias as a way to weaponize their policy overseas in a way that would be explicitly illegal if done overtly directly by the CIA. So I'm looking at the annual budget for Mossad, which is 1/6 the budget of the CIA. I'm looking at the fact that the CIA was formed exactly a year before Israel was formed. I'm looking at the fact that the CIA wanted nuclear proliferation in Israel during the Cold War, so we had a strategic ally that could counterbalance any attacks from Russia. And I'm thinking to myself, why is it that we think Mossad has been controlling us the whole time when we've been the ones controlling Mossad? I mean, their military is dependent on our money. Their defense is dependent on our money. Their existence is sponsored by our own intelligence apparatus. Why does anybody think it's the other way around? I don't get why people think Mossad is controlling our politicians to get us in wars for Israel when we want to go to war in the Middle East all the time to protect the petrodollar, and we use Israel as an excuse by calling any refusal to participate in these wars anti-Semitic or insensitive to our greatest strategic ally or anti-democratic because it's the only democracy allegedly in the region. Like, I'm frustrated with Israel. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to give them any money whatsoever. But when we're talking about who's controlling who, I think it's pretty clear that we actually wear the pants in this household, in this relationship with Israel. They come to us and beg for money. They come to us and insist that we help them for wars. I mean, there's not much of a difference between Bibi Netanyahu and Zelensky, other than the fact that Zelensky's been much more pathetic and disrespectful, and Bibi Netanyahu's done a lot better job of kissing ass over a lot of years, and at least selling the deal as if it was of some sort of interest to the United States. And again, I'm critical. I'm no fan of Bibi, but nobody puts Bibi in a corner. But you see here, this Hunter Biden detail is how you know that it's the CIA versus the CCP as it pertains to Israel. This Hunter Biden Epstein detail. Because why wasn't Hunter Biden ever on the island? And why would it be a conflict of interest? Why would they have to be mutually exclusive? So you've got the CIA trying to control half of our political class through Mossad and other blackmail angles. There's other angles too. And you got the CCP trying to control the other half with insider trading, direct deals, and giant bank accounts. And it makes sense when you see the face of Elvis Chan and the details of what he did on behalf of the CCP while infiltrating the FBI. And you're telling me that Mossad is the greatest threat to our national security? You're telling me that Israel's behind everything? I just don't buy it. Like I said, I don't like them. It's not good. I don't think that we should be giving our money to any other nation. I don't think we should be sacrificing our sovereignty to any other nation. I don't think that we should have a currency that depends on Middle Easterners trading oil in our currency in order for it to sustain itself. Because what's happening right now is the globalist institutions and the climate hoaxers and all of those are trying to convert the way that we do energy altogether to green, renewable. They say it's because they want to save the climate, but we know that climate change is much less caused by humans than is indicated by the science, quote, science. And if it is caused by humans, it's much less dangerous, much less imminently dangerous than they're suggesting. So why is it that they're pushing for this green energy so much? Oh, because if the world stops using fossil fuels, namely petroleum, then that would cause the dollar to collapse, which would justify ushering in a central bank digital currency. The globalist institutions are trying to get the dollar to collapse. China's trying to get the dollar to collapse because of sanctions. And they want central bank digital currency status, global reserve currency status. Russia's trying to get the dollar to collapse because of sanctions. Iran's trying to get the dollar to collapse because of sanctions. And it's like this everyone against us, all versus one war on our economy right now. I mean, they're sending in Mark Carney to be at our northern border to run Canada from the International Bank of Settlements, from the Bank of England, someone who's advocated explicitly for central bank digital currencies, someone who's published, in conjunction with advocating for central bank digital currencies, published books about why we should keep 70% of the world's carbon underground. So he's a climate lunatic and he's a CBDC guy at the same time. What do those have to do with each other? I mean, how can you have such strong opinions on climate change if you're not a climate scientist? And how can you have such strong claims on economic policy or monetary policy if you're not an economist? I mean, maybe he's got a background in banking, maybe he is an economist, but what do they have to do with each other? Why would he be advocating so much for climate if he's really just a banker? Because if we switch to green energy and we stop using fossil fuels, it creates the dollar collapse necessary to usher in the CBDC. So really, it's actually all about money and who controls it. But not just money, it's about monetary policy and who manufactures it, who establishes and controls the infrastructure of it, who administrates the actual system itself. the system administrator, the head admin. It's not the matrix that's the problem, you see. It's the administrator. What was he called, CJ, in the matrix? The guy you meet in the end? Not the oracle, but the admin. Was he just called the admin? I can't remember what they called him. Architect. Yes, the architect. So you see right now what the architects are doing. They're playing the puppet strings. They're systematically manufacturing a total economic collapse so they can usher in the solution, and they're using every angle they can possibly imagine to make it happen. I mean, we are being attacked on all fronts through guerrilla warfare. It's a cultural guerrilla warfare. Famously, we won the Revolutionary War because we would shoot and run away. Famously, we lost the war in Afghanistan because they would shoot and run away. But this is a whole nother level. It's like a metaphysical guerrilla warfare where they hit your mind, they hit your body, they hit your children, they hit your fertility, they hit your money, they hit your rights, all at the same time and in different ways. And it's so saturated and all-encompassing. And it's so subtle and slow that by the time you realize what's going on, if you don't wake up, if you're not sensitive to this degree of evil, then everyone else has been converted and weaponized into the army of darkness. So the CCP has infiltrated our intelligence communities, and they've paid off probably 25% of our politicians, maybe more, leveraged them. They've totally owned all of the technocrats virtually forever because all of the technocratic companies depend on chip manufacturing and technology, electronic development from China. So they bought off the billionaire elite here in the United States of America. They bought off the politicians. And then we have a central intelligence agency who is frantically trying to protect the dollar and doing the most evil things you can possibly imagine to accomplish that, because the fallacy, the flaw is that the monetary system itself is a lie. But the globalists want the monetary system itself to be a lie so that when it collapses, they can do the final solution, the final blow of centralized digital banking control. Because you have to understand that the international bankers, the globalists, established this system to begin with, this fractional reserve central banking from the Federal Reserve, where somehow, miraculously, they were able to get 2/3 of the states to ratify an amendment to our Constitution at a much more conservative time in our nation's history, the first 20 years of the 20th century, to ratify an amendment to the Constitution to legalize an income tax less than 200 years after we fought a war over a tea tax, and establish this whole new banking system, which within 4 years catalyzed World War I, which created the League of Nations, which within basically 10 years, you can argue about the start of World War II, 20 years to be safe, 15, catalyzed World War II, also funded by the central bankers, the globalist bankers. And after World War II, you have the United Nations, which further saturated this globalist momentum. Then the Cold War, which established NATO, which is the military arm of the United Nations, an international military loyal to no one, serving everyone. And now all they need is World War III for the final blow. And it's playing out. CCP buying everybody off, CIA weaponizing Mossad to justify endless wars in the Middle East to protect the dollar. And then the total erosion of our morale and our people and our culture and our beliefs and our faith domestically so that we're weakened and vulnerable. I mean, even the applications that we use that are developed in China are specifically designed to manipulate our population in a way they aren't in China. Chinese kids don't get the same TikTok that our kids get. They're not relentlessly assaulted with trans identity politics, Marxist thought, sexualization met with sterilization, so you sell out to a hedonistic lifestyle without any family to come of it. All while our money slowly washes away like a stone against the ocean where we wake up and we realize for some reason that we're in our 30s and we still can't afford to buy a house, or that we're close to 40 and we still don't have any children. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think happens to someone when they're old if they have no children? They become institutionalized. Nobody takes care of them. They become a burden in the state. And we all know what the state does with burdens. We all know that, what was it, 20% or 15% of all deaths in Canada last year were physician-assisted suicide? I think that company in Canada is called MAID. Something astronomical. Well, that's what happens when you have nationalized health care, folks. When the government is footing the bill for your health care, they're not going to let you smoke a cigarette. They're not going to let you have sodas. They're not going to let you fight for your life. They're just going to give you every way possible, imaginable to die. See, we're supposed to have families and children, so our children take care of us when we're old. That is how someone prepares to not ever once be a burden. It's 1 in 20 Canadian deaths, 5%, 1 in 20. I knew the 20 number, so I was thinking 20%, but still 1 in 20 is astronomical. My point is, you're supposed to have children and families so that your children take care of you when you're old, because that's how somebody takes responsibility for their life so that they're not a burden when they're old. So hopefully when I'm old, I'm not going to be a burden on society because I'll have a family that can take care of me, that I've raised and taken care of. It's perfect justice right there. It's a whole system that doesn't require the government at all whatsoever. But when you eradicate the family, then you justify the expansion of the government. When you expand the government, then you manifest the eradication of the family. It's this downward cycle, and you have to cut it off. And it's always painful to cut it off. It's hard to go on a diet. It's hard to quit an addiction. It's hard to change things that are uncomfortable but unhealthy that we do, that we lean on, that we rely on. Trust me, I know. I get it. But we have to do the tough stuff, and the Democrats will scream and wail and just rage against it. We saw what they did with the tariffs. It's uncomfortable to have a temporary increase in prices because we raised tariffs on China, who manufactures everything, but it's the only way that we can diversify where we source all of our goods in a way that is sustainable long-term and ultimately cheaper long-term. I mean, it's a little pain now for a long-term gain. One of the disadvantages of our civilization is that we have a different president every 4 years or different election every 4 years. And so we can't have continuity of vision or leadership. It's a double-edged sword. It's an advantage because we can fire people who are sucking at the job, but it's a disadvantage because we have inconsistency in goals and visions and strategic output. Xi Jinping is like, I'll be dictator for life. Putin's like, I'll be dictator for however long, whatever. And so they at least have continuity of vision there. Our only continuity has been because of these bureaucrats in organizations like the CIA and the FBI, but we know where that's got us. That's got us in the total erosion of our rights, the perpetualization of war, death of innocence, conspiracy at its finest, at its worst. And fundamentally, the difficult thing about a constitutional republic is that the only way anything ever really gets better is if the people wake up. OSHA famously said, democracy is rule of the people, but the people are retarded, so democracy is the rule of the retarded. And he's right. So the only way we can really fix this country, the only way we can really fix this constitutional republic, I know it's not a direct democracy, thank God. It is a representative republic. The only way we can fix it is to make the people not retarded. And look, when I see these headlines, I'm just met with bemusement and shock. I don't know why it is that the royal family comes up so much, and I frankly find it sickening that anybody in the United States of America cares at all whatsoever in any way, shape, or form, any capacity at all about the royal family. I don't know which princes are princes, which princesses are princesses. I don't keep up with the names. I don't know the difference between Charles and Harry and Henry and whatever. It's King Charles, right? Descended from Dracula?
Yeah, his dad was Prince Philip, who is a descendant of Dracula.
Yeah, Dracula. It's Spends time in Transylvania, I'm told. And you look at his portrait, it's got a monarch butterfly on it because he's a monarch, and you can cut out the middle of it and squeeze it together, and you see it's obviously some Baphomet idol that appears. And if you look at the idol of Baphomet, the horns, it's basically identical to a woman's reproductive system. So it's an old nature worship pagan religion. And that's exactly what we see playing out right now, the worship of nature. In fact, the worship of nature has become so rampant with this environmentalism movement that now it's inverted its whole entire stated intended purpose to begin with. Originally, we were supposed to save the planet so we could save humanity who lives on the planet. Without a planet, you can't have humanity. Now we're supposed to sacrifice humanity to save the planet so that all that's left is a planet with no humanity on it. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's, I guess, idol worship. That's the definition of it right there. And it's all manifest right in King Charles' own portrait with the symbol of fertility on it. Oh, wow. Fertility is totally eradicated for the sake of this climate cult. And I know there are some true believers out there. There's some people that are really genuinely concerned. I crashed a protest in Thousand Oaks a few weeks ago, and I saw a lot of that. I know there are some leftists out there who really wanted a Tesla but can't stomach to get one. Don't have the stomach to get one because Elon Musk went crazy. When I was in California, I saw so many bumper stickers on Teslas that said, "I bought this before Elon Musk went crazy." Pussies. They're driving around in their Rivians, even though Rivian's going bankrupt, and there's no way in hell anyone's ever going to buy that car used, and there's not going to be anybody to service it because they're not able to manufacture anything fast enough ever. Meanwhile, they're pumping electricity in these cars by burning coal, so it's not even solving the problem. I mean, I guess you can make the argument that long-term it'll solve the problem because eventually maybe electricity won't be produced with fossil fuels, so maybe that's the argument there. We have to get enough people in electric cars so that we're used to electric cars by the time electricity isn't bad for the environment. But as it stands right now, you're just pumping coal right into your car when you're plugging it in. Whatever. I don't care. But this fascination with the royal family, I mean, isn't it just sickening? We have a revolution against perhaps the most powerful empire in the history of empires in the world. Over sovereignty and taxes and just abuse of power. It's all listed in the Declaration of Independence, actually an outstanding read. All the reasons listed very explicitly for this Declaration of Independence. And keep in mind, war was not declared. It was known that war would be inevitable, but there was no declaration of war really in the Declaration of Independence. It was just hey, we're independent now. Either post up or get out. Knowing, of course, England would post up. We won. We proved sovereignty to be more powerful than autocracy. We proved nationalism and populism, which is what the Declaration of Independence was, to be more powerful than globalism, which is what the British Empire was. I mean, it was a global empire stretching across India into Africa. All over Europe, whether explicitly or through marriage. I mean, really influential. I think most of the British monarchs are German, actually. But now you have these stories that we have to deal with. There's some weird, bizarre ripple effect of the fact that this royal family exists. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But I've witnessed the infatuation. One of the royals got married like 20 years ago or something. I can't remember which one. And my mom watched every single news broadcast you could possibly imagine of that wedding. What? Your last name's Fried. You're German. We've been here for 150 years. Why do we care? Princess Diana dies, everybody freaks out. And this whole Merkel controversy. And everyone's trying to act like the controversy is over whether or not they've given up their titles, which I don't even get or care. Or the fact that maybe the queen didn't like her because she's a POC. No, nobody likes her because she's a POS. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are inserting themselves into the debate around online safety of minors through a series of events and initiatives. Now, that sounds good to me. I love the idea of protecting online minors. Pedophiles are all over video games like Roblox, in Minecraft. They're all over social media platforms like TikTok. They're in Fortnite. They know how to groom these young kids into accepting inappropriate images, into exchanging inappropriate images and messages. I know it. 100% major problem. But I haven't read this article yet. Seems to me like this might be just the excuse in order for us to do something insidious. While this is undoubtedly a worthy cause, when judged by the declared intent alone, things become controversial and complicated with legislative efforts lacking proper privacy and security safeguards. Here we go. By either not dealing with the ramifications of age verification and digital ID or actively attacking end-to-end encryption, these efforts could serve as the building blocks of a future expansive censorship and surveillance infrastructure exposing all internet users to it. So just like with the 9/11 attack, we ramp up all of these policies, all of this legislation in order to combat terrorism, which is all well and good. But little did we know until years later that, oh, the government can look at us through any of our devices. They can listen to us through any of our devices, even when they're turned off, even when the battery is removed. They tax the hell out of us and print money simultaneously, so we're double taxed. We're taxed on income tax and inflation tax. Inflation is a tax. Then they spend all that money to subvert all of our rights so they can get a bigger take of our income. I mean, this is the slow subjugation of our entire civilization, the slow enslavement of our entire civilization. If you're paying, say, an average of 25% income tax to the government, that means that 1 out of every 4 days that you work, you are a slave to the government. The only difference between you and a slave is a slave does the job that the slave is told by the government or the owner. And here in our country, you can do whatever job you want. You just have to give 25% of your cut to the government. More like the mafia. Basically slavery. And with, frankly, 95% of new hires in California being for the state or federal government, with the massive expansion of the federal government at the expense of the private market, I mean, we could feasibly wind up in a world where you're given 50% of your income to the government and you work for the government, which is like double slave. It's like having a slave and then taxing them yields from their own like personal field. You know, on the plantations, that's where like fried chicken and spicy food and stuff came from. A lot of that. But the slaves would have their own property. It technically belonged to the slave owner, but they would have a portion of the plantation allocated for them to grow things and use for their own personal use. They have their quarters and maybe a small field where they could grow plants and herbs and spices and things like that. And they would raise their own chickens and things like that. And then that's how we have this whole cuisine from South America, rather. Not South America. The South in the United States of America. Came from the slaves. Experimenting with spices, making their own foods. A lot of chicken. Chicken was available. But my point is, we passed an amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America to make slavery illegal, and then virtually every single thing our government has done since then has been either to outsource slavery from China or to slow roll a neo-slave system in the United States of America where you do what the government says and you give 25%, 40%, 50%, eventually all of it to the government. And it's not the same thing as communism. It's similar in many ways. And it's not the same thing as fascism. It's similar in many ways. It's the hybrid of both. It's globalism. Then you have the Prince Harrys and the Meghan Markles coming out and saying, hey, we're going to do this on this PR stunt initiative. We really want to protect the online safety of minors. And what's going to end up happening is massive surveillance, massive restrictions on what you can do with your devices. It'll all be in the name of protecting children when we understand, we know that we don't even have a law enforcement capable of enforcing our existing laws. So this is only going to be enforced selectively. And I love seeing the Kash Patels come out and say which gangbanger they arrested or caught or sent back. And I love seeing the Pam Bondis say the right things about major changes that are going to happen. I'm not ready to give them a hard time yet. I decided I'm going to give them until January 20th of 2026, excuse me. Fact of the matter is, I've been the victim of several major felonies this year. and have seen no effort from law enforcement. InfoWars has been the victim of several major felonies over the years, and I've seen no effort from law enforcement. They only show up when they're not supposed to be there, when you don't need them, and they don't show up for any of the stuff that you actually need. I mean, there are 320,000, 350,000 missing children right now here in the United States of America. Have we found one of them? Have we found any of them? I know that it's great that the trafficking has largely been stopped, that illegal boarding crossings have largely been stopped. I applaud Trump for this, and I know his intentions are good, but where are the hundreds of thousands of missing kids right now as we speak, some of them being drugged and raped? Literally right now, some rapist is having the time of his life on some little kid that was smuggled into the United States in the United States right now, as I speak on air. I don't know where that kid is. If I knew, I would be there right now instead of on air. I am literally just putting a broadcast out to the world that something needs to be done. There's no way that we don't have the capacity to do this. You're telling me that we can assassinate Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, find Osama bin Laden, eradicate entire South American countries, install coups, run an entire CIA cutout in Ukraine, weaponize Mossad to blackmail our entire political class, and leverage an economic war against China, but we can't find 320, we can't even find 320 of the 320,000 missing children in the United States of America because, wow, law enforcement is just too strapped. How many FBI agents are there? Why is it that we have 85,000 IRS agents and we can't just give each of them 5 kids to find, 3 kids to find? Why is it that they're so focused on taxing the hell out of us, chasing every deposit down of us, literally bragging about the fact that they can monitor our bank accounts if they have over $600 or any Venmo account that has over $600 is going to be monitored by the federal government. They're bragging about this. They're talking about arms training for the IRS. Weren't they buying guns and going to shooting ranges so they could weaponize and militarize the IRS? But they can't find 320,000 missing kids? Kamala Harris is sending mothers to prison for their truant kids in California because they're single mothers because of inflation. And because Kamala Harris was keeping people in prison past their sentence to manifest the slave labor that the prison system is, but they can't find 320,000 missing kids or even 320 of them. I don't know, man. I just think we need to get our priorities straight. I think we need to really figure out whether or not we give a damn about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle push for controversial online safety legislation when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, I don't even think they have a kid. We can't find 320,000 kids. I mean, I know it's not his job. They have a kid? We'll see. Have you ever seen a picture of her pregnant? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I remember they had a kid. I just don't pay attention to these royals. I remember when we were in Pennsylvania for the it was in Detroit. We were in Detroit for the TP Action event where Alex spoke and Jack Posobiec was there and others. And some British guy comes up backstage and approaches Alex. What do you think about a royal family? And he just like goes into the fact that they're pedophiles and they're inbred trash and descended from Dracula. And somebody walked up to the reporter after Alex walked away and said, how do you feel about that response? He goes, I think it's frankly offensive. Yeah, you know what's offensive? Inbred royal trash is offensive. With the audacity to think they have some sort of moral authority on the entire world. Just buying up land and bragging about the fact that they're at Vlad the Impaler's castle. And look, I know that the history of Dracula is nuanced. I know that most of the people that he was impaling were Muslim invaders. I get it. But man, you want to talk about humane versus inhumane genocide. You would never see King Charles go hanging out in Hitler's eagle's nest because it's a beautiful property. Of course not. Hitler was evil, killed a lot of innocent people. Millions of innocent people died as a result of Hitler's leadership. No doubt about it. But you're going to go hang out at Vlad the Impaler's castle? Dracula's castle? Notorious for hedonistic, blood-sucking, sexual cult-like behavior and literally impaling people in the tune of thousands? Then you're going to get a painting that depicts the same occultic insignia as Dracula with a monarch butterfly on it because you're King Charles. Dude, I don't know about all that. They even kind of look alike if you look at that painting. other news, we've got more crackdowns on AfD in Germany. And basically all that's happening in the world is a populist awakening and then a counter-offensive against that populist awakening. It is funny how much the Germans say they hate Hitler and the leftists say they hate Hitler and they call you a Nazi and they call you Hitler literally. And they etch swastikas on the side of Teslas and they firebomb Tesla dealerships. They literally destroy private businesses, just like Kristallnacht. They put swastikas everywhere, just like the Nazis. And then they fund Nazis in a war against Russia and Ukraine. Like, I can't think of a single thing that Hitler did that the leftists or globalists aren't doing now, just in a different way. Like, he put people in camps and they died, and he killed millions of innocent people, and millions of innocent people died as a result of his policies. That's exactly what the globalists did with the massive inoculation. It's like a medical experiment and a depopulation of an entire generation all at the same time with the vaccines. Same thing. And Hitler went to war with Russia through Ukraine. We did the same exact thing now, and we fund it now. Same thing. Hitler took over all of the businesses. We do the same thing right now. Our government does the same thing right now by leveraging all the businesses and vying for it. He destroyed the businesses that were not Aryan, that didn't comply with the Nazi policy. That's what our government does right now. They try to bring down InfoWars. It's their own little Kristallnacht. They firebomb Tesla dealerships. They protest outside of businesses determined to be owned by right-wing ideologues. Try to boycott like Chick-fil-A because they're not open on Sunday. Or they're against gay marriage or something like that. I mean, everything Hitler did, the globalists and the leftists are doing right now. The only difference is Hitler was popular. I mean, even down to the clothing that they wear. You see the designer clothing worn by these globalist elites. I'm sure many of them wear Hugo Boss, just like the Nazis literally wore Hugo Boss. They drive Mercedes, just like Hitler literally drove around in a Mercedes. While they protest against Teslas as being Nazi wagons, they're in a Mercedes or a Volkswagen. But they don't have the people this time. Because Hitler weaponized nationalism, which is inherently a popular notion, to exact evil. And what they've done is they have weaponized control and sabotage for a less explicit rule. I mean, at least in Nazi Germany, you could point to the leader. Like, obviously, it's Hitler's fault. He leads the Nazis. But with these globalists, it's so hard to determine one guy. And even when you talk to people who think they know who it is, they just say the bankers or the Rothschild. Which Rothschild? Which bankers? Like, nobody knows who the individual is actually behind all this. It's very shadowy, clouded the dark side of the force is. And so this is subversive, just unidentifiable enemy that you can never strike or bring down because you don't know what you're aiming for. It's like shooting in the dark against some distant front. It's like stories you hear of panic in Afghanistan or Iraq when there's an ambush. I was talking to a former Navy SEAL recently who was telling me about his first firefight or his first ambush in Afghanistan, I believe. And he's like, look, we just heard gunfire from behind us and dropped down, and we turned around and we expended so much, such loud ammunition upon them. Just gun, 50 caliber, whatever. Giant guns. So loud, just overwhelming force. And I look at the statistics. There's like one enemy combatant killed for every 250,000 rounds of ammunition expended in war. You can find it in Afghanistan or Iraq. If Reese is in the back row, I'm sure he could find it. How many rounds of ammunition are spent or are fired per enemy combatant neutralized? It's like 250,000. I think that ranges from like 150 to 300. I think it's 250 is the estimated number. You wonder why the military-industrial complex doesn't always want us to be in war. But that's the notion, that's the philosophy itself of globalism. Just attack from all fronts with overwhelming force. In Vietnam, an estimated 200,000 rounds of small arms ammunition were fired by U.S. units to kill one enemy soldier. In World War II, it was only 45,000 rounds. That's the difference between automatic and semi-automatic warfare. That's another example, too. You have all the leftists and globalists advocating for the eradication of automatic weapons when semi-automatic weapons are much more effective because you only pull the trigger when you actually see a target. But I'm going to get into more actual news on the other side. We've got Supreme Court updates, theater in San Francisco producing musical comedy about accused murderer Luigi Mangione. Trump goes nuclear in late night Truth Social post. Trump signs new ending taxpayer subsidization of biased media. Updates on Harvard as well. I've got some clips to show you. Leavitt saying that she wants Kamala Harris to continue speaking engagements. Obviously, that's a good idea. EU leaders advocating for stronger censorship regulation, all in conjunction with the royal family. More news on the other side. Before we go to break, I need to remind you to go to thealexjonesstore.com. Now, I know what it was like before I started podcasting and being outspoken politically, publicly, trying to build a following. I know what it was like. I still know what it's like to feel like I don't have a voice, to feel like my vote doesn't matter, regardless of whether it's even counted. I get what it's like to feel helpless against this onslaught of evil. I get what it feels like to be helpless against the metaphorical 200,000 rounds of ammunition per Alex Jones killed by the globalists with all their just oversaturated attacks on humanity itself. Mind, body, soul, spirit, freedom, nation, whatever. All of it, everything you love, just constantly under attack in like a dozen different ways. I know what it's like. And the best way to fight back against that is to go to thealexjonesstore.com, where we are trying to generate as much money as possible to ensure that this crew, these hosts, these shows never go off the air, even if the globalists succeed in bringing down InfoWars. They will never bring down this movement, what it stands for, us. And the money that we make not only ensures that this operation stays operational, but that we have the money and the resources and the tools necessary to go on the offense. Instead of playing defense and trying to survive, we're going to go on the offense and bring down these people for the crimes they have committed that we have evidence of and proof of, frankly. From the conspiracy to violate rights to so many other amazing, outstanding, terrible crimes against our people and our freedoms. So please, go to thealexjonesstore.com right now. I highly recommend the methylene blue. The plush frog, you can't go wrong there. Get it as a gift. Whatever you get, you're supporting this network and you'll get an amazing product. Stay with us for more news on the other side.
Of documents that we'd like to see but haven't. COVID and its origins. Yeah. Sure you saw that just before we sat down tonight, the Chinese State Council Information Office, I don't even want to know what that is, but it sounds bad. They have determined that COVID came from us, that it's more likely than not that COVID originated in the United States and not in China. I'm wondering whether you have any dispute with that based on what you've seen over here. The intelligence community has been responsible for trying to figure out, in part, how this thing started.
So I created a kind of a special teams group, the Directors Initiative group, that is focused on investigating a number of the president's top priorities and the things that the American people really deserve and want to know the truth about. The origins of COVID-19 is one of them. So they're actively working on that. A lot of the work that's been done is on covid.gov. Have you had a chance to look?
Oh, Trump changed it.
It's quite a transformation of the website. For anybody watching, if you haven't seen it, check it out.
It's the annoying website to which YouTube and all social media used to refer people with Fauci talking points, and now it's been completely
reversed. So a lot of what's been found is already there. But the thing that we are working with Jay Bhattacharya, the new NIH director, on with, as well as Secretary Kennedy, is looking at the gain-of-function research that, in the case of the Wuhan lab, as well as many of these other biolabs around the world, was actually U.S. funded and leads to this dangerous kind of research that in many examples has resulted in either a pandemic or some other major health crisis.
Well, let me ask you specifically, because we already know that EcoHealth Alliance was partnering with this Wuhan lab to do gain-of-function research.
That's right.
We just have never been able to have somebody say, it was that exact experiment that led to this COVID bug. But have we gotten there? What's the new thing that you're digging in on?
We are working on that with Jay Bhattacharya and look forward to being able to share that, hopefully very soon.
Okay.
That specific
link.
Correct, between the gain-of-function research and what we saw with COVID-19.
I mean, that would be extraordinary because just so the audience knows, if that's true, if it was Peter Daszak's research with the Wuhan so-called bat lady that caused this pandemic, then we did fund it. Then Anthony Fauci helped fund the pandemic.
The thing that he denied over and over and over to Senator Rand Paul's questioning.
That's right, under oath.
Under oath, exactly. So is it any wonder that he sought a preemptive pardon for anything during a certain period of time by President Biden before he left office?
And then strong-armed and smeared people like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, anybody who came out and said, I don't know if that's natural. This actually smacks of lab.
And the reason why this is so important is not just what happened in the past, it's because this gain-of-function research is happening in biolabs around the world. I got attacked, and I think you saw this, we've probably talked about it on your show before, when I warned against US-funded biolabs in Ukraine when the Russia-Ukraine war kicked off for this very reason. Who knows what kinds of pathogens are in these labs, and if released, could create another COVID-like pandemic. And for that, I was called a Russian asset. You're, trumpeting Putin's talking points, all of this nonsense, simply for speaking the truth and stating facts that, by the way, are still on U.S. Embassy Ukraine's website today about how the U.S. has funded these biolabs in Ukraine. But in order to, my point is, in order to prevent another COVID-like pandemic or another major health incident that could affect us in the world, we have to end this gain-of-function research and provide the evidence that shows exactly why and how it's in our best interest, the American people's best interest, to bring about an end to it.
Can I just ask you one other question on that? Why did the intelligence community, why were they so reluctant to just say that? Under Joe Biden, they were split. The FBI eventually said, well, we kind of think it was the lab. And the Department of Energy said lab. But then the other agencies were like, no, we think more natural origin, long past the point when it did not look like natural origin. They tested 80 or 90,000 animals. They never found this version of the virus. So what was going on with the intel community there?
It's a good question, and I don't have a specific answer to it, but I want to point to the contrast of how in some cases, they are very unwilling to come to express a view
that we have in place. And honestly, it's just hard looking at these stacks to even know where to begin. Let's start with Stephen Miller. He's never a bad one to start with. Holy crap, Stephen Chainsaw Miller goes beast mode, savages fake news press for defending illegal alien gang. Let's go ahead and run that clip. I believe it's clip number 2.
Our trade negotiations with China. I'll make another important point on this, which is that there's been many complaints about the fact that there are a lot of products that are sold on Amazon that are actually ripoffs of American products that are then stolen by China, and then they take our IP and they put them into products to try to undersell our manufacturer. So to the extent that we are engaged in labeling issues on Amazon, I would say that would be the most significant one to fix, is making sure we're not undercutting American consumers.
And then one on Abrego Garcia, please. The administration is reportedly inquiring about his return. Is that to check a box for compliance, or does President Trump want him back on U.S. soil, or both?
So, as Secretary Rubio said yesterday in the cabinet meeting, this administration is not going to publicly discuss the inside details of our foreign policy and negotiations with a foreign country. And in particular, we are not going to allow a district court judge to try to become the Secretary of State. Secretary Rubio is the one who, under his leadership and direction at the State Department, is managing the day-to-day relationship with El Salvador. Let's just take a moment, number one, to express our gratitude to El Salvador for agreeing to take some of the most dangerous terrorists off of America's streets and to put them into a safe environment where they cannot continue to engage in acts of terrorism or coordination with the Maduro regime. You may have seen recently an FBI assessment that was unclassified that said that the Maduro regime is using and planning to use Trinidad terrorists to carry out assassination plots on American soil. Now, very few in this room covered that. I'll let you all ask yourselves why you didn't cover it and why your editors didn't assign that story to you. Something I think you should think about on your own. But this is a earth-shattering piece of news. The Biden administration imported a terrorist army that our own FBI assesses is planning assassination strikes on American soil against critics of the Maduro regime. Those are the terrorists that President Trump is finding and apprehending that our Democrat judges and Democrat activists are trying to keep on U.S. soil. Trinidad has the same legal status as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. MS-13 has the same legal status as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. These are foreign terrorists operating on our soil. And our gratitude to El Salvador for agreeing to take custody of these terrorists is immense. With respect to the case that you mentioned, there's now even been more evidence that has been made public of this person's violent, repeated threats and assaults against his spouse, someone who had repeated, documented human trafficking and human smuggling offenses, somebody that has extensively documented membership in MS-13, a terrorist organization, and of course he had MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. This is a person that was a clear and present danger to the safety of the American people. And it is a sad reflection on the state of our media and many of the outlets represented in this room that you obsessively try to shill for this MS-13 terrorist. Well, no coverage occurred in your papers about any of the Americans that were raped and tortured and murdered by the illegals that Biden was importing into our country. You know, you talk about due process. The Biden administration made the decision to give extensive due process to 2 Trinidad terrorists that were apprehended at the border just a couple years ago. They were 2 gentlemen. They were from Venezuela. They were members of Trinidad. The Biden administration Border Patrol apprehended them and made the decision to provide them with extensive due process, put them onto a program known as supervised release, and put them on ankle monitors so that they could go through a lengthy legal judicial determination as to whether these legal aliens who had just set foot on U.S. soil might want to live in the United States for the rest of their lives. What was the result of that decision? What was the result of that choice that was made? Those 2 men kidnapped a young girl named Jocelyn Ungary from her family. They beat her, they sexually assaulted her, they tortured her, they stripped her, they murdered her, and they dumped her body. That is what the Biden administration's policy was. Most of your papers never covered her story when it happened. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists, to the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kinds of gangbangers as you possibly can. If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or Trinidad, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors, and that one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. So you're not going to get an ounce of sympathy from this administration or President Trump for the terrorists who've invaded.
And that's exactly right. This media deserves no sympathy whatsoever. And many of you listeners out there may have seen the story from the Daily Beast. Rubio's team launches witch hunt for staff who criticized Alex Jones. Now, we're going to get into the details of what happened. I know Alex Jones is going to be covering this during the Alex Jones show today, so make sure you stay tuned because he knows all of the context around this much more than I do. That being said, let's just examine the headline specifically. Rubio's team launches witch hunt for staff who criticized Alex Jones. So first of all, they're calling it a witch hunt, which automatically triggers subconsciously in all of our minds this notion that someone is being accused of something they didn't even do, like a famous witch hunt. What the hell is the name of that town in New England or whatever where all the witches were killed? Salem. Yeah, like the Salem witch trials. A Salem witch hunt. They weren't really witches. They were just burned at the stake for being witches, apparently. Right? We all know this story. We're taught about it incessantly in school. Maybe some of us read The Crucible. Rubio's team launches a witch hunt. So, okay, these people are being falsely targeted then. It must be falsely targeted. What are they being falsely targeted for? Oh, they criticized Alex Jones. Oh, the right just holds up Alex Jones as this perfect, amazing thing. And anybody who criticized him is going to be the victim of a witch hunt under this new dictatorship, under this new authoritarian rule of the Trump administration. Then you look at the details, and it immediately becomes obvious how hypocritical the notion is. The State Department Undersecretary Darren Beattie filed an 11-page request in March for all records of internal communication related to 39 individuals and 16 organizations who track disinformation or criticized President Donald Trump and his allies, according to MIT Technology Review. The request, which was framed as a transparency initiative, reportedly targeted names like former U.S. cybersecurity official Chris Krebs, who denied Trump's false claims of a stolen election, anti-Trump pundit Bill Kristol, the Atlantic reporter Ann Applebaum, and even tech mogul Bill Gates. State Department also sought documents and correspondence from staff that mentioned controversial names such as Trump, Elon Musk, Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as well as keywords like Black Lives Matter, January 6th, QAnon, and more. So they're finding these documents where individual U.S. citizens in dossiers were targeted by the Biden administration, and the headline is calling it a witch hunt against staffers of the government or of the former administration because they were critical of Alex Jones. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think is more morally acceptable? For the federal government to manage and increase transparency regarding its own employees, its own staff, its own bureaucrats, or for the federal government to have secret documents that name private U.S. citizens who are considered political dissidents so that dossiers can be formed on them so that they can be attacked? I tell you what, I am so sick of this trash happening to this institution because it's not happening to us. It's happening to free speech. It's happening to freedom of the press. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Even if I didn't agree with Alex Jones, I would be happy and honored to work for Alex Jones because I believe in free speech and freedom of thought and freedom of press. Even if I thought everything he said was absolutely crazy, so long as he wasn't lying or stealing, if he was wrong about everything in my mind, I would still work for him because this place is now a symbol of free speech, of free press, because of what they've done, because of putting us under a Type 3 assessment in December of 2013, where they're allowed to send in undercover agents to work here, where they're allowed to follow us in public places, where they're allowed to do things like monitor our bank records and transactions to develop information. It's a human intelligence operation. So that if Alex or anybody here does anything wrong over the course of many years, they can weaponize and leverage that information to blackmail a staffer or another witness to testify against us in the court of law without even having to use the information they collected. They're trying to find dirt so they can blackmail someone who's in to leverage that dirt against us. And they weren't able to find anything. And when they finally realized that Alex Jones was a straight arrow, that he wasn't committing any crimes, that there was no tax fraud, that there was no money laundering, that there is no hidden money, when he finally realized that the business operated honestly as a real business does, as an American business does, where we broadcast, we have overhead expenses, we sell things, and if there's money left over, we expand. And if there isn't money left over, we contract. That's how it works. It's a very simple business model. Not a lot of bells and whistles to it. But the federal government had the audacity to spy on us. And when I spoke to the FBI just a couple of months ago, just regarding some other stuff, I mentioned, why is it that my place of work is under a Type 3 assessment? Lady's like, oh, I had no idea. Can you send me the case number for that? Sent her all the information, followed up with her, never heard back. So while my coworkers are being murdered, while Owen Schroyer's getting swatted, while our coworkers' family members are getting swatted, me too, and I don't want to talk about it much because it's an old news story. While we're getting murdered and swatted and sued for the most money that any company or individual has ever been sued for defamation, while they're constantly sending in bad actors to try to sabotage the way that this business operates, just because they want to silence and establish a precedent to end freedom of speech so that once it works here, they can weaponize the same model across the board on the Joe Rogans or the Russell Brands or the Tucker Carlsons. Because it used to be that all you had to do was get in good with the board of directors at one of these major media outlet institutions or get in with the editorial board of one of these major platforms. And you could just have a problem journalist fired, or you could have a problem pundit fired. That's what they tried to do with Tucker Carlson. But now you can't shut somebody up by removing them from the bondage of the institutions they work for. In fact, Tucker Carlson is way more powerful now than he was when he was at Fox News because he's able to have long-form conversations about very controversial things which just wouldn't have worked at Fox. That's why nobody watches Fox or MSNBC or CNN or reads New York Times or reads the Wall Street Journal. Why everybody's getting their news from InfoWars, from podcasts, and from X. That's it. But they spied on us, and they still are spying on us under a Type 3 assessment from the FBI. We have CIA people on leaked video, hidden cameras, coming out and saying that they leveraged their influence to catalyze these civil suits against us. We have the documents showing that the federal government, the Department of Justice, gave millions of dollars to the very entities and individuals responsible for these lawsuits against us. So it's a federally funded, intelligence-operated mission to silence freedom of speech and freedom of the press because they don't like what we say. You think they're doing all of this because they're just so abundantly upset about one story that we may have gotten wrong many years ago in 2012? You think they're trying to shut down InfoWars because they're so offended by something Alex said in 2014? No. They're not coming after InfoWars or us because of anything we got wrong. They're coming after us because of everything we get right and the influence and the impact we have on the people of this country to wake up, to realize, to not buy into their post-apocalyptic globalist system. So an intelligence-operated, federally funded, they take my taxes that are automatically withheld from my paycheck, and they use it to fund lawsuits against my place of work and to pay for agents to assess my business every 30, 60, and 90 days according to the parameters set for a Type 3 assessment according to the CIA manual, where I have to have CIA whistleblowers call me and let me know what's going on and who's really doing it. And it took them like a year and a half to send me the FOIA request that I submitted. And it came 3 days after Trump became the president of the United States. But the Biden administration couldn't get it done at all, the entirety. And they only sent me one of at least 198 documents. Because based on the serial number, we could tell there were at least 200 other documents. It was like 196 and 197. So there was a document before that, all heavily redacted. But Type 3 assessment as a white, racially motivated hate extremist organization. All while Comey and others in the intelligence community are saying that we don't target people based on being white supremacists or white racially motivated organizations. It says so in our Type 3 assessment from your organization, you moron. And it all started under the Obama administration. It all got worse under the Obama administration. So many people voted for Barack Obama thinking that he was going to protect whistleblowers and allow more government transparency. And the first thing that he did when he got into office was sell out to the same deep state that he ran against. He tricked everybody, even tricked Edward Snowden himself. Edward Snowden blew the whistle. We all know what happened to him. He had to seek asylum in Russia. Well, if Russia's so bad, then how come our whistleblowers and our journalists have to seek asylum there? And if Ukraine is so good, then why are our journalists being killed in their prisons? And what's more, why are we funding it? If Ukraine is so good, why do we have a Ukrainian Nazi cemetery in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, just less than an hour north of Philadelphia? I've showed it to you a million times on this show. I'm not going to waste your time. And now we have the Daily Beast coming out with the audacity to call it a witch hunt for this administration to uncover the former administration's espionage of independent podcasters and journalists? So uncovering the injustice is the injustice in the eyes of these leftists, but the injustice itself, there was nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Whoa, Marco Rubio announces he has located dossiers created by Biden regime to censor Americans, including Trump officials. There's at least one person at this table today who had a dossier on them. I'm going to run this clip. Go ahead.
Something else we got out of the business of wasn't widely reported, or maybe it was. We had an office in the Department of State whose job it was to censor Americans. And by the way, I'm not going to say who it is. I'll leave it up to them. There's at least one person at this table today who had a dossier in that building of social media posts to identify them as purveyors of disinformation. We have these dossiers. We are going to be turning those over to these individuals.
Me or Elon? We can follow up with the media story.
Well, we are going to turn over these dossiers to the individuals, and they'll decide whether they want to disclose it or not. But just think about the Department of State of the United States had set up an office to monitor the social media posts and commentary of American citizens to identify them as vectors of disinformation. When we know that the best way to combat disinformation is freedom of speech and transparency. And
the
so
best way to combat disinformation is freedom of speech.
We're not going to have an office that does that.
100%. Because lies cannot live in the truth. The only time censorship is needed is if you have to censor the truth in order to prop up the lie. That's why it's so blatantly evil. And they use clever words like disinformation because on the surface, everybody would say that they don't like disinformation. Disinformation by definition is the advocacy or propelling or promoting or broadcasting of something knowingly not true for the sake of harming an enemy or sabotaging an enemy or confusing an opponent. That's what disinformation means. Misinformation is if you're misinformed. You just got something wrong. Disinformation is when you intentionally plant something that is wrong, like, I don't know, saying that the Hunter laptop was a Russian disinformation story was itself a disinformation story. That's disinformation. But when the government monitors us for disinformation, when they try to be the arbiter of truth from the White House of all places, I mean, the truth is supposed to be determined in the judiciary, in a court of law with a jury, whether it's a civil suit or a criminal suit. But when the government is trying to proactively censor and wield its power and influence, its fascist power that we have erroneously given it over the years in order to leverage their influence over the boards of directors and the different content policies of these institutions like Google, Meta, Twitter before it was X, in order to silence, censor, and eradicate all political dissidents, well, there's no coming back from that. There's no coming back from that at all. So they spy on us, they sue us, they fund the whole thing with money that they've stolen from us. And then they say it's a witch hunt when we look into it. I don't know if I'm on the right side of history or not because I'm not sure that history always gets it right, but I know I'm on the right side. And I don't care what my legacy is. All I care is whether or not my conscience is clean at the moment of my death. I don't want to descend into some psychosis of DMT-ridden hell with all the guilt that I would feel if I didn't fight the good fight. I fight every day knowing that the moment that I die, as Bill Murray famously said in Caddyshack, I will achieve total consciousness. So I got that going for me, and you can have it going for you too by going to thealexjonesstore.com. Now look, I laid it out for you. FBI has been spying on us since 2013. We've seen the leaked videos, undercover videos of CIA contractors and FBI contractors saying that they leveraged their influence to bring us down by catalyzing these civil suits. We have the public information that the DOJ funded millions of dollars to the very entities responsible for suing us. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chase Geiser, your host this morning. Harrison Smith will be hosting the War Room this afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. Owen Schroyer is out of town until next week. And Alex Jones will present to you a legendary 4-hour relentless broadcast today starting at 11 a.m. Central in 26 minutes and 12 seconds. So make sure you share that everywhere. All right. I've got all this news on the desk. Pentagon Inspector General expands investigation into Hegseth's second signal chat. Danger from space. Old Soviet satellite Cosmos 42 set to fall back to Earth. Homan on arresting sanctuary city leaders. EU leaders advocating for stronger censorship. Look, what's happening today is what's been happening since this Trump administration started. Trump administration has been kicking major butt. Populism has been awakening worldwide, and the globalists are freaking out, and they're desperate, and they're dangerous. China's more dangerous than ever. Russia's more dangerous than ever. Iran's more dangerous than ever. Ukraine's more dangerous than ever. The United States is more dangerous than ever. And now what we see is the last desperate gasp of air, the last desperate thrashing out of this beast that we have almost pinned into total submission. We see the legacy media being weaponized with just hit piece after hit piece, whether it's on Alex Jones or others of the Trump administration. Major media pundits frantically trying to figure out how to reach an audience. They're firing people like Joy Reid. Rachel Maddow's getting passed. Raises are being refused on Lemon's gone. Brian Stelter's barely back. I mean, it's pathetic watching it just die right before our eyes, while podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience explode, while shows like Tucker Carlson's Independent, Tucker Carlson Network explodes, while the Alex Jones Show explodes, reaching literally billions in impressions. Billions. I think we even showed the analytics in one of our promos months ago. I could show you. It's astounding, the impressions that we're getting. And it's because the people are waking up. So they've lost that angle. They've lost the media angle, the psychological angle on the people. All they have now is a total control over the education systems. They are still successful in indoctrinating future generations in primary school, in high school, and certainly in higher education. It's all just loaded up with Marxist thought. But since they went too far in these institutions, alienating white people, saying there's such a thing as white privilege, saying that just because you're white, you're inherently morally inferior, your character is inherently poor, or you can't have a moral position on specific or certain issues because of your immutable characteristic of race. That's what critical race theory is. Critical of the white race theory. That has alienated an entire generation of young men. Young men who are sick of being broke. They want to have families. They're sick of being attacked by feminists, either among their peers or among these authoritarian elites and these higher education institutions. And they're lashing out. But the world's population is only something like 7% white. And I'm not even saying that it's because they're white. Really, I've said it before, they're attacking Western values, Western culture, Western civilization. They've just married the two concepts into the white race so that when they attack the white race, they can indirectly attack all those values without sounding ridiculous. That's why they come out and say that being on time is a product of whiteness, or punctuality is a product of whiteness, or math is whiteness. They're beginning the transition and just attacking the values then instead of the race, because the race is just now assumed that that hardware has been installed in the infrastructure of so many in this generation. So really our major threat is these institutions and then the way they enforce the ideals of these institutions on the corporate side through ESG and DEI, but even that is going away. Even that is eroding. So they're losing the influence of the next generation. They've lost the influence of the legacy media, but now they can still come after our health because of things like atrazine in the water, chemicals in all of the food. Chemtrails in the air. And so now through pharmaceuticals and the pollutants and the poisons, literally the poisons, they're, as a last hope, trying to make everybody as mentally ill as possible and then sterilizing as many children as possible who show any sign of having transphobia. So we see a massive genocide taking place of Western culture and Western people. Anyone who avows Western values, a genocide taking place through vaccines, SSRIs, anxiety meds, and this trans movement. And now through MAHA, even that is failing. It's everywhere that they've been attacking. The Trump administration has been putting up a wall. The only thing that we haven't been able to totally clean out yet, or totally find an easy way to stop yet, is the intelligence community, because it's shadowy. We still haven't gotten to the bottom of the Epstein stuff. I think we will. We'll see. I'm going to give them time. We still haven't seen any justice for the crimes against humanity committed by the Anthony Fauci's and others. And Fauci's crimes go way back to the 80s. I mean, he knew that hemophiliacs were being infected with HIV and hepatitis by the medicine that they were being given. He knew for at least 2 years while it was happening. Then when it came out that it was happening, the drug companies made new, safer drugs for Americans, and they sold their remaining inventory to third world countries and just allowed them to get HIV and hepatitis. But China suggests that COVID-19 originated in U.S. in response to Trump allegation. Trump's saying it's the Wuhan lab. China's saying it originated in the U.S. And the answer is probably both, because we funded the gain-of-function research in the foreign labs after we made it illegal to do gain-of-function research in the United States. Why that $1.2 trillion omnibus bill almost gotten through by Mike Johnson in this administration before it was shut down by Elon Musk weaponizing Twitter, X. That $1.2 trillion omnibus bill advocated for no less than 12 biolabs throughout the world. There's video on YouTube of the biolabs in Ukraine bragging about the research that they're doing. Hunter Biden was invested through Rosemont Seneca in Metabiota, which received a $24 million grant from the Department of Defense. They were involved in the biolabs in, I believe, Ukraine and Wuhan. So our politicians are making money off of this research, and then it's being used to develop these contaminants that are then released by our enemies that then totally change the political landscape of our nation. We want to talk about election interference. Beijing, April 30th, Reuters. China restated its case that COVID-19 may have originated in the United States in a white paper on its pandemic response released on Wednesday after President Donald Trump's administration blamed a lab leak in China. China shared relevant information with the WHO, which is China, by the way. There's no difference between the CCP and the WHO, except the letters. And the international community in a timely manner. The white paper said, emphasizing that a joint study by the WHO and China had concluded that a lab leak was extremely unlikely. Really? So it's more likely that it came from a bat down the road from a major biolab? Or it's more likely that it came from the United States than from China? Well, then how come the Wuhan lab in like September of 2019 immediately put out a public contract to totally revamp their ventilation system? Why is it that scientists from the Wuhan lab disappeared? I don't know if they're confirmed dead or not. I think they were. It's been so long ago now. Why is it that all domestic flights in and out of Wuhan were shut down while international flights in and out of Wuhan were allowed to continue? And why is it that you lied about the lab leak when we had scientists like Brett Weinstein prove that there were obvious examples of how it had been manipulated in the lab because it had too many changes, too many mutations, which seem to have happened simultaneously that would have taken hundreds or thousands of years in nature to occur. But this did just come across my desk. Tom Homan says Trump admin rescued 5,000 missing migrant children. Wow. Earlier in the show today, if you're just tuning in now, I was complaining about the fact that the Merkels and others, and just the globalist elite, they can, always find a way to audit you and tax you and arrest you and attack you and antagonize you, but they can't seem to find any children. I said, even if they just found 320 children of the 320,000, at least that would be progress. But here I'm seeing that Tom Homan says Trump admin rescued 5,000 missing migrant children. Border Czar Tom Homan says some of the 5,000 missing migrant children rescued by the Trump administration were found in forced labor. Homan says 300,000 migrant children went missing or were trafficked into the United States under the Biden administration. Hey, that's progress. And look, Trump's first week in office, he signed so many executive orders. The news was so astounding and provocative that you couldn't even keep up with what he was doing. We couldn't even get out a report on the executive order that he signed an hour ago before another one was signed a minute ago. So he has all this massive productivity in the first week of office, and then things begin to slow down to a normal pace because You signed all the executive orders you could sign. Now you have to go through the process for the other stuff you have to do. That it seems like the Pam Bondis and the Kash Patels and others aren't doing anything, but the fact of the matter is it just takes time to do big things sometimes. Most of the time, maybe even all the time, it takes time to do big things. And so I understand if you can't find the 320,000 missing children in the first 100 days or overnight, like you can sign executive orders all night, overnight, like Trump was doing. But I at least want to see progress, and 5,000 is progress. I mean, 5,000 a month for 12 months would be 60,000 in a year. You wouldn't find them all at that pace. It needs to be faster. And you don't want to wait 4 years to find them because then they're trafficked out. They're done. Or they've overdosed. But native-born workers have surged over 1 million back to all-time high as government employees tumble. For much of the past 4 years, we dutifully reported month after month how the U.S. labor market under the Biden administration grew almost entirely on the back of foreign-born workers, who, as we also first revealed and eventually was widely accepted, were primarily illegal aliens. So that was what the Democrats were trying to do the whole time. The illegal migrants thing was about changing demographics. It was about stealing elections, but it was mostly about replacing the labor that is not being born here any longer and ensuring that Democratic states are overrepresented in the census every 10 years so they get more representatives in Congress, so they're disproportionately represented on national policy. That's the long game. It's not, I mean, stealing elections is real, but it's not just about that. It was a long con. And even Chuck Schumer came out, I'm not going to belabor the crew with finding the clip. He came out and said, look, there aren't enough people being born here and everybody's retiring, so we have to import migrants in order to fill the jobs. The political class admitted that they were importing labor into the United States in order to replace the dying native population. And that's what Trump is rectifying with things like cracking down on inflation, with things like implementing these tariffs on our competitors so that it's more feasible and from a business standpoint, economically feasible, to have a manufacturing facility here. Things like cracking down on what's causing autism, what's causing the massive infertility rates. I mean, some estimates suggest that by 2050, men won't even be able to have children. Then what do you think the government's going to do? A brave new world. It's going to be test tube babies, engineered for the perfect role with different genetic attributes. They're going to have a perfectly diverse eugenic utopia. Yeah, let's play this clip with sound.
Producing it on its own. Now more than ever, we're short of workers. We have a population that is not reproducing it on its own with the same level that it used to. The only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants, the dreamers, and all of them, because our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers, but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there
and the
are
Republicans love, Greg Abbott's and others love it. I'm not criticizing him, but I'm criticizing him. I don't think that he knew he was doing this. The Republicans love to say, hey, we're not going to have the migrants in our state. We're going to ship them to San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York. And the Democrats act like that's such a crime against humanity to move these people around. But they love it because all it does is increase the reported population of their states, which determines how many representatives they get legally in the House of Representatives. They want the red states to send the immigrants to the blue states so they get more reps, more cheap labor, more taxes. They love it. So the whole thing worked out great. I don't know if the Republicans were in on it and knew and it was like a uniparty thing, or if they were just kind of tricked and they did it because it was politically expedient. But the answer is not to send them to sanctuary cities. The answer is to send them home, out of the country, out. And rather than importing people who don't assimilate to our culture, many of them terrorists, many of them criminals, rather than importing them in to replace our culture, why don't we find a way to incentivize people here in the United States of America to have children, to have Native Americans? Why don't we get to the bottom of the fertility rate issues, get to the bottom of the inflation issues that have forced people to wait so long to buy a home and get married and start a family, force people to outsource the raising of their children to the state? Well, those problems are much more difficult to solve. And frankly, the political class doesn't want to solve those problems because they are bankrolling and banking off of these very problems. They love the idea of expanding public education and expanding fertility clinics and making euthanasia clinics. And they love the idea of everybody being on SSRIs because they're all depressed and tired from the food dyes and the atrazine. They love the idea of just pumping kids full of amphetamines so that they comply with the Industrial Revolution era style of our public education system where a bell rings every 47 minutes and you move on to the next thing. They love the idea of allowing our entire civilization, way of life, culture, people to wither away like a plant without enough sunlight, so long as they can reap the rewards, reap the benefits. So really what we have to determine, and what our political class needs to decide, our political leaders, are you in the business of selling out America, or are you in the business of buying in to Americanism? They try to criticize Trump because he's a billionaire, or because his hair is eccentric, or because he ordains his properties with gold, or because he marries supermodels, and they try to say he's vain, or that all he does is golf, even though when he's golfing, he's doing business. They try to criticize him. But just like with InfoWars, they try to attack us for the stuff they say we got wrong. We know that they're really attacking us for everything that we get right. They say they're attacking Trump for all those things. The real reason they're attacking him is because he's an outsider who's decided to buy into America instead of sell it out. You can tell by the tariffs, which are going to diversify our manufacturing to India, Mexico, and back to the United States, God willing. You can tell by the fact that he's talking about Fort Knox at the same time as he talks about government overspending and Doge, because he understands that we need to get back onto a gold standard, because this petrodollar standard gets us into war after war after war in the Middle East and creates nothing but enemies overseas. I mean, Iran, Russia, China, others. It's not sustainable. It's a Ponzi scheme. He gets it. He knows money. He understands that the toxins in our food and water and air are making our people infertile and retarded, which is why he's hired RFK Jr. to solve the problem. So he's fighting for our minds, our bodies, our currency, our culture on every single front. And sometimes these issues are so tantamount, they're so huge, so giant, so seemingly insurmountable that maybe you can't do it all in the first 100 days. Maybe it takes a while to uncover the fact that institutions like InfoWars have been spied on by the FBI since December of 2013. Maybe it takes a while to get to the bottom of the fact that the CIA was behind catalyzing these lawsuits against us. That the DOJ's money, our money, was used to fund many of the institutions responsible for these lawsuits. These conspiracies against our people, our press, and our rights are so humongous, gigantic, gargantuan, that they're going to take all 4 years. And frankly, 4 years isn't even going to be enough. I mean, we need to elect the right person, not just in 2024, but in 2028. And not just in 2028, but in 2032. And we need to understand that in the event the globalists succeed in collapsing the whole world's economy under this Trump administration, that it's not because of populism that the economy collapsed. The economy collapsed so that it could be blamed on populism. They want the stock market to crash. They want the prices to go up. They killed 400% more chickens than the 4 years prior to the last 4 years under the Biden administration. So they could artificially increase the egg prices. They could justify inoculating all the poultry with mRNA vaccines, which could then be developed into mRNA vaccines that would inoculate you when you ate the poultry. I know nobody's ever going to willingly get a vaccine again after what happened. Their uncle can't move his arm anymore. Their dad had a stroke. Turbo cancer, people in their 30s and 20s, brain aneurysms, people in their 20s, heart attacks, people in their teens. Nobody's ever going to get a vaccine voluntarily again. So what do? You create an artificial shortage of food, and then you use vaccines to save the food supply, what they tell you. And then you change the vaccines later after you've created the legal infrastructure to vaccinate these supplies so that they vaccinate the people who consume the food. You can go back to 2020 and read articles about produce being laced with mRNA vaccines and how that could get everybody vaccinated. They were talking about it with produce. Now they're doing it with poultry. They're just not talking about it because we're on to them. But we have to pay attention, folks. It's not normal for poultry farm fires to go up 400% for no reason between 2020 and 2024 compared to 2016 and 2020. That's not normal. That's orchestrated. The egg prices go up drastically, but only in the United States of America, not in Mexico or Canada or anywhere else. Oh, it's because there's an artificial shortage that was created to justify the bad policy. Create the problem, offer the solution. Create the problem, offer the solution. That's what they do. And frankly, everything bad that's happened to us as a nation over the course of the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years has been as a result of our government and its intelligence apparatus, the unchecked fourth branch of government, creating problems and then offering the solutions. Solutions worse than the problems themselves. I mean, our response, I guarantee you, our response to COVID undoubtedly, not even close, killed millions of more people than COVID-19 itself. Not just because of the unemployment going up and the heart attacks and the stress-related deaths, not just because some of the other side issues, but because of the massive vaccinations of all these people and the fact that they would refuse to even acknowledge any of these side effects or deaths as a result of it. I know so many people who have come down with leukemia, specifically blood cancer, as a result of these vaccines. Out of nowhere, no family history, no smoking, no drugs, barely drinks, runs marathons, turbo cancer, probably going to be dead in 6 months. One person I heard of, God bless her, brother died. His bones stopped producing blood. Doctors said they'd never seen it before. Well, you know what else you've never seen before? Massive distribution of mRNA vaccines.